right, thank you guys for coming out again. My name is Ben Meadows with Georgia Student Finance. If you're not familiar with that organization, that is an agency of the state that's responsible for the disbursement of the HOPE funds. And so that's one of the things that we'll be talking about tonight is that HOPE scholarship. We're also going to take a look at the FAFSA application, which is the application that's used to apply for both federal and state aid. And then we're going to talk a little bit about scholarships as well, how to go about doing a scholarship search and how to increase your chances of receiving a scholarship. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and get started. And the first slide here kind of outlines our sources of financial aid. And this is the important thing to remember here is to make sure that the students are applying for each of the various sources. Unfortunately, what we found is that many students will end up only applying for the first two listed, which is the federal and state aid. And the reason for that is it tends to be the easiest. When the student completes the FAFSA application, it's one application that applies to the student for both of those sources, both their federal and state aid. The other sources that you see listed there have to individually be applied for. And some of these take a little more effort. It might take a copy of the student's transcript. It might take an essay, a letter of recommendation. Each scholarship in those additional sources will be slightly different. But the third one I want to highlight here is the colleges and universities. Each school that you guys are looking at, whether it's 2-year, 4-year, public, private, in-state, or out-of-state, has some form of institutional scholarships. And so no matter what school I was looking at attending, I would make sure I asked each of those schools at least 3 questions. Can I get a list of your institutional scholarships and grants? What is the deadline, and how do I apply? Because if your students are eligible for those institutional scholarships, we want to make sure that they're cashing in on those. And so the college that you're looking at should be able to provide you a list of all the different institutional scholarships that they have to offer. Private foundations, employers, service organizations, the bottom 3 you see listed there, many of those are found on the local level. And so I like to group these in what we call community-based scholarships. Different businesses and families local to Whitfield County and Dalton City area may offer scholarships for your students. And so usually the best place to find these is the local high school. So here at Dalton High School, the guidance office usually has a list of these local scholarships. And so if you go by the counseling office, or they may have it online now, you'll be able to go there and find some of the local scholarships. Usually these are in lesser amounts than what you'll find from the universities. These may only be $500 to $1,000. But the important thing to note with scholarship searching is that there's no limit to the amount of scholarships a student can apply for or receive. So the thing that we want to do is make sure that we're applying for as many as we're eligible for. Now, under the various sources, there will be different types. And you'll notice the first one there is merit-based. And what merit-based means is it's referring to the student's performance, whether it's in high school or in college. They're usually looking at a GPA or a test score to qualify for these type. The example of this is the HOPE scholarship. If students maintain a 3.0 academic grade point average, 9th through 12th grade, then that student has earned their HOPE scholarship. So it is considered merit-based. Many of the institutional scholarships that you guys might be applying for will be merit-based. In other words, they're usually looking at that GPA and SAT or ACT score to determine whether that student would be eligible. The next one is need-based. And what this is referring to is when we complete the FAFSA application, it will assign what they call an EFC number. And that EFC stands for Expected Family Contribution. And that EFC can range anywhere between $0 and $100,000. And so depending on what that EFC score is will determine whether the student qualifies for any need-based programs. An example of this is the Pell Grant. The Pell Grant is a federal grant program. We'll take a closer look at that in just a second. Non-need-based is awarded strictly based on residency. So by it being a U.S. citizen or permanent non-citizen resident of the state of Georgia, then that student would be eligible for the HOPE grant. And so it has nothing to do with merit, it has nothing to do with need. It is strictly awarded based on that residency. And then we also have loans. We have student loans, and then we also have parent loans. And again, anytime we see that word loan, that money has to be repaid. Scholarships and grants are what we consider free money. It does not have to be repaid. Work-study programs, this is where the student could have a job on campus, take whatever money that they have earned and apply that towards their tuition, room and board, books, fees, pretty much any cost that occurs there at the college. Military aid and grant programs, if you have family members or a parent that served in the armed forces, there could be additional scholarship money there for your student. And then the last one is the Path to College 529 Savings Plan. And so all those are going to be classified as different types, and you'll see those pop up under the various sources as well. Now, when we talk about financial aid, the school has to determine the financial need of each student. And the way that they do that is by this formula that they use. They take the COA, and COA stands for cost of attendance. And every school determines their cost, and every cost will be slightly different. Each school is going to have different tuition rates, but when that school determines their COA, they take everything into consideration. It's not just the tuition, but it's also room and board, books, fees, transportation costs, laundry fees. They come up with a total number of what they think it is to attend their institution for one full academic year. And that is the COA that they'll use on the FAFSA form to determine the financial need of your student. The EFC is determined by you. When we fill out the FAFSA application, it will take a variety of different factors into consideration, but ultimately what it will do is determine the expected family contribution of that family, that student. So they'll take the cost of the institution, subtract the EFC, and whatever that equals is the amount of financial need that student shows for college. Now, the school the college will do their very best to make sure they're meeting the financial need of that student. But keep in mind that this is a joint effort. It's not just the college's responsibility, but we're pulling money from the federal, the state, the community, the institution, and the family all together to make up this package for the student. And so it does take effort on each individual's part. And so with that being said, that's kind of how it all comes together to make the financial aid package for your student. Now, as far as factors that will influence that EFC when we fill out that FAFSA application, obviously from the slide here you can tell that it has more to do with the parents than it does the students. And the reason for that is because in most situations, students going off to college are classified as dependents. And so for that reason, they're looking at both the parent and the student information. For the parents, they're looking at things such as income, savings, assets, age, household size, and also how many people in the household are attending college. So if you have multiple children going through college at the same time, that will help lower that EFC, which in turn means more financial aid for the student. In terms of what they're looking for the student, it's really only looking, is that student working and paying taxes? And if so, does that student have a savings? That's pretty much the extent of what they're looking at on the student's behalf of things. They're also looking to determine whether that student is independent versus dependent. And the main difference there is if the student's dependent, they're looking at both parent and student information. If the student's independent, then they're just looking at the student's information. Now, factors that are not included on the FAFSA, they're not looking at the value of our home. They're not looking at our business if it's less than 100 employees. And they're not looking at any retirement contributions, such as 401ks, Roth, things such as that. They're not looking at your retirement. They're just looking in terms of income, assets, with the exception of your business and home, and your savings to determine that EFC. Now, once they collect that information on the FAFSA form, what is it that your student's applying for in terms of federal aid? Well, there's really two main programs. One is the Pell Grant, and this is the most common. It is a need-based grant that pays a maximum of $5,710 per academic year. I'm sorry, $5,730. And that is based at a zero EFC, meaning that when we complete the FAFSA application, if it tells us that our EFC is a 0, then our students would be eligible for the full amount. If that EFC is 5,000 or higher, then that student would be ineligible for the grant program. And the reason for that is they're saying the expected family contribution is equal to that or greater than what the grant would offer. And then if that EFC ranges anywhere between that, then it would be a sliding scale. So if that EFC were 1,000, then that student's looking at $4,700 of Pell Grant money. If that EFC were 2,000, $3,700, and so it will range that way. The FSEOG grant is a grant that some colleges receive that could be an additional $100,000 to $4,000, and this depends on how the school awards that. They will usually award it to the students that are showing the greatest need, but again, that's up to the college's discretion on how they award that. But again, this is also based on that EFC number, and it will be in addition to the Pell Grant. And then there are also federal work-study programs, and these are jobs on campus, again, that are reserved for students that have a very low EFC score. And so all three of these are different federal programs that are available. Now there are also federal loans, but keep in mind these loans, again, have to be repaid. And there are two types of federal loans. There are subsidized and unsubsidized. The main difference here is who's paying the interest on the loan while the student's in school. With subsidized, the government or taxpayers are paying the interest on that loan. And with unsubsidized, the student is responsible for that interest. But with either type of federal loan, repayment does not begin until 6 months after graduation, or the student were to drop below half-time in their studies, which means taking less than 6 credit hours. So if we get into college and we do need to take out a federal loan, it's very important that our students maintain at least 6 hours worth of coursework to defer those payments until after graduation. The PLUS loans that we see listed at the bottom of the page, those are loans that would be in the parent's name. There's only so much loan money a student can take out in their name. And the reason for that is those loans are not based on credit score. They're given in what they call full faith that that student will pay that loan back once they graduate. But because of that, there's only so much loan money they can take out per academic year. The PLUS loans would be in a case where there's additional loan money that's needed. And that's where it could be taken out in the parent's name. And those are based on credit score. And so the next slide here kind of shows us how much loan money our students can take out. Most students that are classified as a freshman, the maximum amount of federal loan money would be $5,500 per academic year. And that will increase with increments of $1,000 for each year of the students in school. So a sophomore is $6,500, and then juniors and seniors would be $7,500. Now, if the student is classified as independent, that baseline increases to $9,500, and it works the exact same way. Increases $1,000 for each year. So in terms of federal aid, it mainly comes in two forms, need-based and then federal loans. Fortunately, we live in the state of Georgia, and we're very fortunate here because there are a lot of different scholarship and grant programs available for Georgia residents. And so that's what we're going to take a look at next. And if you'd like to follow along with me, there's a brochure, if some of you have it, that's up there. It's called Want Hope. And it kind of outlines some of these different scholarship programs, the requirements, and also how much they pay. And so we're going to take a look at the Hope Scholarship first. And for students that are Hope Scholarship eligible, Want Hope. Sure. All right, so while everyone's grabbing the Want Hope brochure, I'll just quickly go over the federal aid again for those that just came in. Federal aid mainly comes in two forms, and that's need-based and loans. And so when we complete the FAFSA application, it applies our student for both federal and state aid. The federal aid is determined by what they call an EFC score. That stands for Expected Family Contribution. And students are eligible for the Pell Grant depending on that EFC score. So the Pell Grant pays $5,730 per academic year based at a 0 EFC. Once that EFC exceeds $5,000, then they're saying the expected family contribution is equal to that of the grant, and so the student would be ineligible at that point. And if that EFC ranges anywhere between those two numbers, it would be a sliding scale. And so that is the most common federal need-based program that's available. There's also a FSEOG grant, and that is also based on need that can range anywhere between $100,000 and $4,000 depending on how the school disperses that money. Other than that, there are loans available on the federal level, and there are two types of loans: subsidized and unsubsidized. And subsidized would be the lowest interest rate, 3.8%. That would be in the student's name, and it caps at $5,500 per academic year. And then there's unsubsidized, that is 6.8%, and that's also available for students. So at this point, we'll take a look at some of the state programs. Again, you guys can follow along with me if you like. The two main scholarship programs offered in the state of Georgia are going to be your Hope Scholarship and your Zell Miller. And so we'll take a look at Hope first, and to qualify for it, students need to be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, a resident of the state of Georgia, and they must have a 3.0 academic grade point average. Now, when determining that 3.0, the way that you can go about finding out what your Hope GPA is by getting onto the GA College 411 website, and there's a link on the right-hand side of the web page that says View Hope GPA. And so when we click that and log into our student's GA College account, it will populate their transcript along with their current Hope GPA that they have on file. Now, keep in mind that that GPA will change each time the high school uploads their transcript, which usually occurs about twice a year, in October and February, and then for the seniors again after graduation in June. And so that June upload will be the final GPA calculation for your student. And that GPA will need to reflect a 3.0 or higher in order for the students to qualify for the Hope Scholarship. Now, once the student qualifies for that out of high school, they have to maintain that GPA once they get into college in order to keep it. So at the end of every spring semester, regardless of how many classes or hours the student signed up for, is when they're going to check to make sure they're maintaining that 3.0. The Hope Scholarship will pay a portion of the student's standard tuition, and the reason that they say portion is because these scholarship programs are based on lottery revenue. And so depending on how those lottery sales did from year to year will fluctuate the amount of that Hope Scholarship. Currently, we're seeing around 85% of the tuition paid at your public colleges here in the state of Georgia. Now, if your student's planning on going to a private Hope-eligible school, then it's no longer a percentage-based, it would just be a flat amount. And so we're currently seeing that being a little less than $4,000 per academic year. The Zell Scholarship is next, and for students to qualify for it, they need a 3.7 academic grade point average, and this is calculated the exact same way, it's just higher. And in addition to that 3.7, they'll need a 1200 on the math verbal combined score of the SAT, or a 26 composite on the ACT. The other way that students could qualify for the Zell Scholarship is if they graduated valedictorian or salutatorian of their high school class. Now, once the student qualifies for the Zell Scholarship out of high school, once they get into college, they need to maintain a 3.3 in order to keep it. And they'll check the GPA at the end of every spring semester, just like they do Hope. If the student were to lose either one of these scholarships, they have one opportunity to regain it. So you can regain it once. However, if you lose it a second time, you cannot gain it again. You've lost it for good at that point. Now, having said that, one thing that I really like about the Hope Scholarship is, let's say your student graduated high school with a 2.999. Maybe they were right there on the verge of receiving that. Now, even though they did not qualify for it out of high school, after the first 30 hours of credits in college, if they have above a 3.0 at that point, they can gain the scholarship. So it does work that way. It's not retroactive, so it won't go back to pay for that first year, but they can gain it and continue to receive it as long as they're maintaining that B average. So it does work that way. And then the scholarships, both Hope and Zell, will expire when the student crosses one of three checkpoints: 127 attempted hours, 7 years from the date of their high school graduation, or their degree, whichever one of the three comes first. Really, the one thing you might want to pay attention to with that 127 hours is that word attempted, because sometimes that will catch students. Students are very eager to transition from high school to college. They're very excited, and some students, once they get their first semester, they'll sign up for more classes than they intend to complete, or maybe they'll sign up for too rigorous of a schedule. Let's say your student were to attend Georgia Tech, and for their first semester they sign up for biology, chemistry, physics, and calculus 1 their first semester, and realize it was way too much science and math and they need to drop a course. If they drop it after the drop add date and receive a W for withdrawal, then that's considered an attempted credit, and so that will be deducted from that total 127. So it's very important to make sure that if your students are signing up for classes, to make sure they're not dropping too many, because if they receive a W, then that's being deducted from their 127 hours, and they could get to that senior year and be out of funding. So that's one thing you might want to pay attention to. Other than that, they have 7 years from the day of their high school graduation to use all 127 hours of that Hope Scholarship money. The next one we'll take a look at is the Hope Grant. And this is very similar to the scholarship. Okay, it pays the same percentage or same portion that you're looking at with the Hope. The main difference here is the scholarships are for students that are seeking degrees, whether it's an associate's or a bachelor's degree. The grants are for students that are going after a certificate or diploma program, and these are mainly found at the technical schools. So if your student's interested in one of the tech programs, then they can use the Hope Grant. There is no minimum GPA and no minimum test score to qualify for the grant. The only requirement for that first year is that the student be a U.S. citizen, permanent resident, and resident of the state of Georgia. Again, it pays the same portion as the Hope Scholarship does. However, after the first 30 paid hours, which is about 1 year's worth of coursework, the student needs to have a 2.0 to continue to receive that. And it caps at 63 semester hours, which is about 2 years full-time. The Zell Grant is also available, and this pays 100% of the tuition. The main difference here between the Hope Grant and the Zell Grant is that the student needs to have a 3.5 at the end of every semester in order to continue to receive the Zell Grant. If they do not have that 3.5, then it's going to default them down to the Hope Grant. And just like the Hope, it will pay a maximum of 63 semester hours for that grant program. The third one that we see on there is the Strategic Industries Workforce Development Grant. And the great thing about this is it can apply to up to 63 different certificate programs found at the tech schools. And this stacks in addition to the Hope and Zell Grant. So if you have a student that's looking to go the technical route, this really makes up a nice financial aid package for those students. This grant here ranges anywhere between $150 up to $1,000. It depends on the program they're enrolled in, along with how many hours. But again, it stacks in addition to the Hope or Zell Grant. And then the last one is the Hope GED Grant, and this is for students that maybe encountered hardships in high school, had to drop out and get their GED. The state of Georgia will give those students a $500 voucher that's good for up to 24 months to use towards any Hope eligible school here in the state of Georgia, and that's called the Hope GED Grant. And then the loans that you see listed at the bottom there, the Student Access Loan and the Student Access Loan Technical, SAL and SALT, those are loans that are offered by the state of Georgia. These are mainly known as gap financing, and the reason they say that is that for the SAL loan, you must take federal loans first. So you would not be eligible for a SAL unless you've already taken the federal loans. But let's say your student were interested in attending a private college. It was maybe $30,000 plus a year. That $5,500 of federal loan money would not get you very far. And so that's where the SAL loan is there to help fill in that gap, if that were the case. And that is a loan that's up to $10,000 at a 1% interest rate. So if additional loan money is needed, that's certainly one that I recommend because it has a very, very low interest rate on it. And there's a brochure in the back that has more information on it if you would like.
I can ride my bike with no handlebars, no handlebars, no handlebars.
All right, so if you guys don't mind, we're going to take a 2-minute. Just keep going. Okay. We're going to get into FAFSA application a little bit here. And again, the FAFSA form is how we'll apply for both our federal and state aid. And so the one thing I want to point out with this slide is to make sure you're going to this web address to fill out the application. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that want to rip you off and take your money. And they have developed websites that look identical to the real one. The only problem is that they will charge you to fill out your free application for federal student aid. So we want to make sure that we're going to this website, which is fafsa.gov, to start that application. And again, this is what the website will look like. And I don't know if you guys in the back can see this, but there's a little lockbox at the very top of the screen. That is known as the PIN site. Because this is an electronic application, it does require that you have a PIN number in order to sign it. And in most cases, both the parent and the student will need a PIN number. And so if you have not applied for that PIN yet, you'll want to make sure you go there first and click that, and that's where it will allow you to apply for that PIN number. Now, once it assigns you that PIN number, make sure you keep that safe. Don't give that PIN number to anyone because this is your electronic signature. This is how you will take out some of those federal loans if you need to. So this is something that you certainly don't want to give anyone. In fact, parents, I would recommend that you do not give the PIN number even to your student, because we have seen in some situations student taking out parent loans in the parent's name, and the parents never even knew about it, and the reason they were able to do that is because they had the parent PIN number. So again, this is very important. You want to make sure you keep this safe. But once you apply for that PIN, you'll click on Start a New FAFSA, and it's going to bring you to this page here. And there are always two different FAFSA applications on the website at all times. There's one for students that are currently enrolled in college, and another application for upcoming freshmen. And so for the seniors in here tonight, you guys would want to select the 2015-2016 FAFSA application. And so we'll select that and hit Next. And it's important to note that in order to complete this FAFSA application, we will need to have done our 2014 taxes. Now, the important thing is to make sure that the application is getting submitted to the college by the deadline that they requested. And this goes back to the difficulty in financial aid. Every deadline will be different for each school that you're looking at. And the general rule of thumb is the bigger the institution, the earlier the deadline. And so if you're applying to a very large Division I school such as UGA that has 35,000 students, you might notice that their FAFSA application deadline may be earlier than what you were planning to do your taxes. Now, you can still continue with the FAFSA and you can still submit that to the school, but you would have to do so using an estimate of 2014 taxes if you know that you're not going to have time to complete that. But in order for the school to process your aid and send your student an award letter, you will need to have completed your 2014 taxes. So if it's at all possible to expedite that process or do those a little earlier than normal, you might want to go ahead and start those as soon as you get your W-2s back in February. Now, once we start the FAFSA application, if we get hung up and we need to contact them, there are 3 ways to contact them. You can call, email, or you can chat with them live. It brings up a little chat window and you can talk to a representative that will walk you through the process. But Section 2 of the FAFSA that we come to after we select which application we're planning to fill out will be the dependency status. And this will determine whose tax information is used. Is it just the student's, or is it both the parent and the student? Now, the dependency status has nothing to do with the IRS or whether you claimed a child or someone else claimed your child on the IRS tax forms. The dependency status is strictly based on these 13 questions. And they're similar to, is the student over the age of 24? Are they married? Do they have kids? Do they serve in the armed forces? Are they a veteran? Are they homeless? If the student selects no to all 13 questions, then according to the FAFSA, that child is a dependent and the parent's tax information is going to be required next. If the student selects yes to one of the 13 questions, then that student would be classified as independent, which means they're just looking at the student's information. So that's the main difference here for dependent versus independent.
Can you help us out real quick? Guys, real quick, there's this FAFSA information. There's a ton of information about how to fill it out, okay? And so Big gives a lot of valuable information here. Also know this, that in case you get lost here in this, because there's a lot of tax stuff, we're going to have a FAFSA day here at school in the spring semester, okay? So any senior, Dalton High School senior, and your parent can come with you that day. And just keep an eye on the website, the Dalton High Counseling website, and we'll announce the day. We usually have it in February, March. And so we'll bring all of our Dalton High School seniors from the English classes. We'll bring them to a computer lab. We'll have some college financial aid reps with us, and we'll spend that entire day just assisting you guys in filling out your FAFSA. So when you do that, you'll need to bring your parents' tax returns, the information that he was talking about when your parents go get their taxes completed. You'll need to have like confidential information with like your parents' social and all that kind of stuff. Bring that with you. Parents, you're welcome to come on that day if you want to. Hey, I want to bring all this, let my kid carry on all those important documents. You're more than welcome to come with your student that day if you like. Okay, you don't have to, but you're more than welcome to. So if you get lost in this, I just wanted to reiterate the Dalton High School Counseling Office is here to help you guys make that next step, whether it be FAFSA, other financial aid information. Okay.
And so in most cases, like he was mentioning, students will be classified as a dependent, which means the parent section is next. And this is what it will look like. And so again, depending on when that application is due, we have three options. Did your parents file, or will they file, a 2014 income tax return? And so we can select my parents have filed, my parents will file, or not, or my parents are not going to file. And so depending on, again, when that deadline is, if you know that you're not going to have your 2014 taxes done by the deadline that the school is requesting this, then we would select will file. And it will allow us to do an estimate, and we can use an estimate based on the W-2s, or if your income doesn't greatly fluctuate from year to year, you might be able to use last year's tax information to do that estimate. But however you think would be appropriate, you can select the appropriate box there. Now, if we select have filed, and it's been 2 weeks prior since we have filed our 2014 taxes, it will allow you to use what they call the IRS data retrieval. This will save you about 20 minutes off the application process, and it will also save you time with the college. Because once the college receives your FAFSA, sometimes they have to verify the information you submitted is correct. And so they'll do that a variety of different ways. The most common is they'll request a copy of your 2014 taxes. However, if you use the IRS data retrieval, it works in place of that. So it will verify it for the college. Again, it will save you about 20 minutes off the application. They'll download your tax information directly from the IRS to the FAFSA form, and again, verify it for the college. Now, there are special circumstances, and the reason we mention this is because sometimes things happen that can't be explained on a 2014 tax form. And so these are things such as maybe a parent lost their job in 2014. Maybe there was an emergency where there were excessive medical bills. If any of these circumstances applies to your family or applied to them in 2014, this is something that you want to appeal. But you do not appeal it directly to FAFSA. You would appeal it to the financial aid office at the college. And they have the power to adjust that EFC number to get your student a little more financial aid, again, but it would be based on that documentation that you provide to the school. So again, if one of these situations applies to your family, I would encourage you to make sure that you appeal that to the financial aid office. Once we put both the parent and the student information into the application, it will bring us to the end of it, and this is how we sign and submit it. And again, you'll need your PIN number in order to sign the application. You'll read the little paragraph, put your PIN number in there, and then click submit, and you can submit this to several colleges, so you would list those colleges there as well. And then once you sign it, submit it, and send the application off, you'll get a confirmation page in your email. And this is something that you'll want to hang on to, because it will have your EFC estimate on there to give you an idea of whether that student's going to be eligible for any Pell Grant money. And it will also have what they call a DRN number, and this stands for data release. Now, because this is electronic and sometimes systems fail, or maybe that application was supposed to send electronically but it did not, and the school contacts you and says, we still have not received your FAFSA application, you can give them that DRN number and they can pull it off the FAFSA servers. So it's very important that you hang on to the confirmation page. It usually takes the schools about 2 weeks to process the application once you submit it. So give the colleges about 2 to 3 weeks to process it. And then every school is a little different, but you might start getting award letters in the mail. Now, generally, these aren't sent out till sometime in late spring, early summer. But again, every school is different. Some will be sending these out as they process the FAFSA applications. Others will wait to a certain date and send all the award letters out. So every school will be different, but if you're wondering when it's going to come in the mail, you can contact the financial aid office at that college, and they should be able to let you know when they send out the award letters. But this is what one looks like. It will have the COA of the college listed on the left-hand side. So it'll have their total costs. On the bottom, it will have all the financial aid that your student is eligible for. And on the right-hand side, it will have your EFC, which was determined based on the FAFSA information that you submitted. This is a closer look at the average award letter. So for John Doe, he completed his FAFSA and sent it in. Looks like he is eligible for the full amount of the Pell Grant, which is that $57.30. He is also Hope Scholarship eligible. And then he's also opted to receive both subsidized and unsubsidized loan money, which is totaling his financial aid package to $18,010. And again, if your student has applied for institutional scholarships, community-based scholarships, those also would be listed on there, and it would give you a total amount. Now, this does not mean that the student has to accept it. They can choose at this point whether to attend that college or whether not to attend. And so this is just giving you an idea of whether how much financial aid that student would be eligible for should they choose to attend there. So this is just kind of providing you with that data. And here are some additional resources. GAcollege411.org is a huge resource to you guys. It not only has a scholarship database of over 18,000 national scholarships, but it also has practice tests for your ACT and SAT. And in many cases, higher scores means more money for college. So it's a good way to study for those. It also has information on how to help you choose a college. You can search based by major, location, public, private, in-state, out-of-state, a lot of different options there. FAFSA.gov, GSC.org, that's where you will go to fill out your FAFSA application or apply for your state aid. And then studentaid.gov is a good read to get you familiar with a lot of the financial aid terms and acronyms that you'll see throughout the process. So all of those are very good resources. And then should you need to contact me for anything, if I can help you with your FAFSA or answer questions about your Hope Scholarship, my contact information is at the very top. My phone number, if you want to write it down, is 678-495-8103, and that email address is the best way to reach me because I'm on the road a lot, and that's Ben M. B as in Bravo, E as in Echo, N as in November, M as in Mike, at GSFC as in Georgia Student Finance Commission, GSFC.org. I know that was a lot of information, but does anyone have any questions? Sure. In a situation like that, they're usually looking for the parent that provides 51% support to the student. And in most cases, that's the parent that the student lives with.
Okay.
And if that parent has remarried, then they're looking for both the parent and the step-parent's information on the FAFSA form.
What is the that secure web address
To fill out the FAFSA?
Yes, you go on this address.
Sure. It's FAFSA, FAFSA.gov. And I'll see if I can go back here.
If you need to, all the links are provided on the website on the GA College 411. Those are all the legit websites. Because there's a lot of those, like you were saying, there's a lot of those FAFSA websites. FAFSA stands for free application. But there's some other FAFSA sites that are private that will charge you to fill that out. So you want to make sure if you have a question about these websites, always go back to GA College 411 and all those links to the FAFSA, the HOPE application, all that stuff is legit.
Can we obtain a copy of this PowerPoint?
Yes, good question. This presentation, hopefully, as long as our technology is working right, the PowerPoint and being audio will be like a podcast on our counseling website, but we'll definitely have the PowerPoint on there as well in a PDF where you can print it off. Any other questions? I tell you what, we're also for the folks, and guys, we apologize, but we had some folks wait for us in the Commons. We ended up having to move this. We have a lot of scheduling issues, the reason why we're in the media center. But we're actually going to take some more questions if anybody has any, and then we're going to actually show the first few slides that folks missed who were in the Commons. So, does anybody else have any other questions? Any other questions? We'll all, as always, be available afterwards if you want to talk to us individually. So you guys, thank you so much for coming out. Remember the FAFSA Day. Tell your seniors to be on the lookout for that. And so as far as the timeline, as parents, we always want to know, what do I need to be doing now? Okay? So we're in, we're creeping up on January here soon. So you guys, if you haven't already applied to a school, you need to have applied to college. Okay? If you're a high school senior, you need to have applied